Mark Mormons. I'm the Senior Vice President of Entrepreneurship and Venture Development at the Arizona Commerce Authority. I'm proud to be presenting today's session of the Small Business Bootcamp and Resource Collective. I want to first take a moment to thank all of our partners across the state. We've been running this bootcamp for several months now, and we couldn't have done it without many of the organizations on the screen and many more, and excited to be partnering with them to bring these resources to you. The Small Business Bootcamp and Resource Collective is designed to help companies with 20 or fewer employees sort of navigate and return stronger from the COVID crisis. Like I said, it's a statewide initiative where we've partnered with organizations across Arizona to bring daily content to you through the end of this month on how to best plan, respond, and return stronger from COVID. The Resource Collective is also an aggregated site and resource repository so that you can go onto our website. The link is there at the bottom of the screen, and I'll also post it in the chat window. You can find recordings from our past sessions, register for future webinars, as well as find links and resources from our partners across the state. Here's that Resource Collective piece. Again, there's the link where you can go and find all sorts of guides, toolkits to help you respond to the COVID crisis. This week, we've got some great sessions for you today. Today we'll be talking about PPP, what happens next. We're also going to talk about how to successfully sell during COVID-19 and how to stop the loss of sales as well. On Wednesday, we'll be hearing from the AZ MEP program to support manufacturers across the state. On Thursday, we'll be talking about how to re-energize your business and growth model. And then finally, on Friday, we'll be hearing from a GCU professor on how to plan for disruption. PPP, quick update. An extension has been signed just over the weekend. President Trump signed the PPP extension. So applications are now being accepted through August 8th. And our speaker today, Amber Cordoba, will talk about that process as well. Before we get started, wanted to point you towards a few of our other resources. So we've partnered with SBDC chapters across the state. They have great resources for coaching, mentorship, support, templates to help you run your small business. We've also got the Arizona at Work workforce program that can help with finding employees, certification processes, helping you scale your business. And then finally, the Arizona MEP program, like I mentioned, they'll be speaking during bootcamp on Wednesday for manufacturers in the state. I'd also encourage you to check out the governor's website, arizonatogether.org, for a collection of latest news, updates, resources for all things COVID. And then finally, here's just some examples of the types of resources at our Resource Collective. Again, I'll post the links to this in our bootcamp page within the chat. But these are the types of guides, whether you're a hotelier, restaurateur, retailer, all sorts of great information for you on that site. So be sure to check out our website, azcommerce.com/COVID-19 for the latest news and updates. As you all know, this situation is changing constantly, so we try and bring you the latest information so that you can run your business accordingly. Today, we've got Amber Cordoba from Prestamos. She's been a great partner to us as well, helping us keep informed on all things PPP, and she's excited to chat with you today. So without further ado, I will hand over my screen to Amber and let her take it away.
Good morning, everybody. Hope you all had a nice holiday weekend. Let me go ahead and start my slideshow. Okay, can you see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so your Paycheck Protection Program loan is now funded. So what's next? What are your next steps? For today's discussion, we're going to talk about what comes next for the small businesses that have received their PPP loan and how to prepare your business to handle the forgiveness process. Also want to give a couple updates on the PPP program, and then I'll give you an idea of what we're going to be talking about today. So as Mark mentioned, on Saturday, President Trump signed an updated extension. So the applications will now be accepted through August 8th. There's about 130 billion still remaining in the program. Each borrower is still only eligible to get one PPP loan at this point, and you can apply through us or your lending institution. If you do want to apply through us, you just go to our website and start the application process. Today we are going to be going over an overview of the program, the forgiveness requirements, including the payroll and other eligible expense requirements. We'll talk about the new safe harbor rules and FICA deferment that are both a part of the Flexibility Act that was signed last month. Also some record keeping tips about applying for a forgiveness, FAQs, and then there's some time for a live Q&A session for anybody that might have any additional questions. So just a quick overview of the program. The PPP, or Paycheck Protection Program, is a forgivable loan from the SBA if certain requirements are met, and it should be 100% forgivable if you meet these requirements. If you don't meet all of the requirements, or you partially meet requirements, it is a sliding scale. It's not all or nothing. You will apply for forgiveness directly through your PPP lender, so you'll want to find out from your PPP lender what their process for forgiveness looks like. Your loan term starts the day that the PPP funds are put into your bank account. And once you've used all of your funds up, then that's when you can apply for forgiveness. You don't have to wait till the end of your 8 or 24-week term. You have 10 months to apply for PPP forgiveness after the end of your loan term. I know a lot of people right now are very curious about when they can apply. They just want to get it off and done with. But you do have 10 months to apply, so there's not a rush. And your lender will also have 60 days after you submit your application for forgiveness to make a determination and submit that to the SBA. So it's not going to be this quick overnight process where you know what your forgiveness amount is. So try to be patient with the process. I know it's confusing and people really want to know, am I going to have an obligation? But it's not something that's going to be a quick process for forgiveness. If there is a portion of your loan or your entire loan for some reason that's not forgiven, there's two sets of terms depending on when your PPP loan was funded. So if your PPP loan was funded prior to June 5th, you'll have a 2-year term at 1% with a 6-month deferral. If your loan was funded after June 5th, you'll have a 5-year term at 1% with a 10-month deferral. You can ask your lender if you were funded prior to June 5th to change your terms from 2-year to 5-year, but both you and your lender have to agree to that extension. So what are the requirements to get forgiveness? So for full loan forgiveness, you have to meet a couple of conditions. First, at least 60% needs to be used W-2 payroll. That's the W-2 payroll where taxes are withheld and you consider them an employee as opposed to a 1099 contractor. This is a decrease from the original 75% that was required. The new Flexibility Act that came out last month, they really did a lot to help reduce the requirements that were really stringent and making it difficult for people to get full forgiveness. A lot of people were having trouble bringing back all of their employees right away because we're still at partial capacity. So they reduced that number from 75 to 60%, which increased the ability up to 40% for other eligible expenses. And we'll talk in a little more detail about what those are in a future slide. You'll also want to restore your employee headcount by December 31st or meet one of the new safe harbor requirements, which again, we'll go into some more detail about. And then you want to make sure that your compensation for each employee is at least 75% of what it was in the prior quarter in order to get full forgiveness. So payroll expenses are considered all amounts paid to W-2 employees. So those are, again, those employees where you withhold their taxes, you provide them a W-2 at the end of the year, and it's up to the first $100,000 in compensation, and those employees must have a principal residence in the United States. And eligible expenses are going to be salary, your hourly wages, commissions or bonuses, cash tips, payments for sick leave, paid time off, pretty much any standard compensation, and that's up to that first 100,000. In addition to that, you can use your PPP loan proceeds for employee benefit programs. So that would be your health insurance or retirement plans that were in effect prior to February 15th, 2020. You can also use the PPP for payment of state and local taxes. So that would be your unemployment taxes that we pay here. And then for those of us that are self-employed individuals and we received a PPP loan based off of our 2019 Schedule C, if you have an 8-week term, you can use 8/52 of your net profit. So you would take your total net profit, multiply it by 8, and divide it by 52. That's the maximum you can use in the 8-week term for loans that were funded prior to June 5th. Everybody else is on a 24-week term, and you're eligible to receive forgiveness on 2.5 times your monthly net profit from your 2019 Schedule C, and that should be what your total PPP loan is, because that's what your lender would have based it on. Now, if you were funded prior to June 5th, you have the option of keeping the 8-week period, or you can ask your lender to do the 24-week period. This allows you to get 100% of your PPP loan forgivable for owner compensation replacement, as opposed to just the 8/52, which is somewhere around 70–75% depending on the amount. So that's something that you're going to want to look at if you don't have other eligible expenses, so that you can use it for owner compensation replacement. Other expenses that are considered as eligible for that 40% are any rent or lease payments for contracts that were in effect prior to February 15th, 2020. And that would be any amount that's included in the lease agreement. So this would be your rent or lease amount, sales tax, CAM charges, anything that's a part of your lease should be considered an expense. And then any utilities for contracts, again, that were in effect prior to February 15th, 2020. So this would be your water and sewer, electricity, telephone, which would include cell phone, internet, gas and propane, and transportation. And then also the interest-only portion for mortgages or fixed loans. So if you own a commercial property, the interest portion, or if you have an SBA loan, a micro loan, or other kind of small business loan, or lease a piece of equipment, you can pay for the interest-only portion and you can't do any prepayments. So just remember that. There's some new safe harbor rules which have really helped out, especially since the going back into the workplace has been quite the challenge, especially for us here in Arizona. So they changed the date from June 30th to December 31st, where you can restore your full-time equivalent to pre-COVID numbers. So if you are unable to rehire your individuals who are employees prior to February 15th, and you are unable to hire similarly qualified individuals to fill those positions before December 31st, 2020, then you fall under the safe harbor rule. So if you have an employee that you've asked to come back, you want to do that in writing and say, I would like to restore you to full hours at the same salary amount. We would like you to come back. And they reject that offer because they're making more on pandemic unemployment through PUA, or they just don't feel comfortable coming back. For whatever reason they reject your offer, you want to make sure that you have that in writing. And then you do need to notify DES within 30 days of the rejection of the offer, and it may impact their unemployment benefits. I know this puts small businesses in kind of a weird place, having to report their employees, but if you're unable to bring your numbers back up, and this is one of the stipulations, it's either your employee or your forgiveness. There's another safe harbor rule in regards to compliance. So this is brand new. If you have the inability to return to the same level of business activity that you were at prior to February 15th due to compliance requirements, so Arizona Department of Health Services, the CDC, OSHA, if there's any compliance issue that is preventing you from being at full business capacity. So if you're a restaurant, you need to have social distancing so you can't seat your full restaurant, or your restaurant is now closed and you're only doing takeout, that's a valid safe harbor clause because you're not able to operate at full capacity. So you would fall under the safe harbor rule. And I think most businesses will fall under the safe harbor rule. Either you're not going to be able to bring somebody back, or you're unable to bring your business to the same level of activity because it's not possible, or you don't have as many people coming to your establishment or utilizing your services because people are still self-quarantining. There's more people that are ill or just not wanting to go out. So pretty much everybody should fall under these safe harbor rules at this point. Another thing they did with this most recent Flexibility Act is allowed for the deferment of FICA. That's the federal Social Security tax. And this new quarterly report, the 941, that should be coming out, that's due by the 15th of this month, should provide for the option for you to put that you're deferring this. You can continue to defer these payroll taxes, that's 6.2% of your employer taxes, once you get your PPP loan, but only up until the point where the forgiveness decision is made. So once you've applied for forgiveness and you've received the determination back from your lender, then you can no longer defer your FICA anymore. And then you won't have any payment penalties or interest on this, but they will need to be repaid, and you have 50% due by December 31st, 2021, and then the balance due by December 31st, 2022. So the nice thing about this is that it allows you to free up some of your cash flow for right now. You will have to repay it, but it does open up some cash flow to help you with operating expenses at this point. So in terms of record keeping and applying for forgiveness, some best practices for record keeping. If possible, we recommend that you establish a second bank account to keep all of your transactions separate. This will allow you to have just really clean records, and it won't be commingled with any of your other business expenses. You can do all of your payroll from there. You can do your rent payments, you can do your utility payments, or you can make transfers out of that account and just denote what they were for. Also recommend that you keep a file with copies of any of your leases or utility contracts if you're going to use those as part of your forgiveness. Keeping your payroll records or payroll stubs, payroll report, something from your payroll service provider. Invoices, copies of checks, and then any other kind of backup data for how you spent the funds, maybe a copy of your bank statement from your separate account. And then if you did make any offers of employment that were rejected, you want to make sure that you keep that as well. And I recommend that you start the record keeping process once your loan is funded, so that in 8 or 24 weeks, you're not looking back trying to find all those details. If you keep it, it'll just make things easier for you. If you are a self-employed individual and you're taking draws, recommendation just to keep it nice and clean is that you take 1 draw a month or maybe 2 draws a month. And either in the check line, or if you're transferring it to another bank account, you just make a memo that it's a draw and whatever the number is for the month of July. That way it's nice and easy for you to keep track. If you have a 24-week loan term, you want to make sure that you're doing at least 2.5 months worth of draws. That's 10 weeks. It's the same as 2.5 months. So that's the equivalent of what your PPP loan is. You can take those funds over a longer period. That's not a problem. And another question we get asked a lot is, can I use 100% of my PPP loan for W-2 payroll? And the answer to that is yes, you can use 100%. You just have to use at least 60%. You'll want to work with your lender to apply for forgiveness. So each person will work directly with the lender that funded their loan. You have 10 months from the end of your loan term, so 10 months from the end of 8 weeks or 24 weeks based on what your loan term is. And you want to be prepared to provide all of the documentation that they've requested at that time. And remember that lenders will have 60 days to make a determination before sending your application over to the SBA for final approval. So some frequently asked questions that we run into: what if I have an EIDL advance? So if you applied for the EIDL program through the IA, the disaster loan, any advance thought that's that $1,000 per employee up to $10,000 is removed from your PPP forgiveness amount at that. So you will have that back. Another question is, can I pay 1099 contractors? No, you cannot pay 1099 contractors because they're not considered W-2 employees, so you cannot use your PPP funds to pay contractors. Another question that we get a lot is around utility, what's considered a utility. So things that are not considered utilities, they're a part of your lease and a part of your lease payment, would be janitorial or cleaning services. So you have somebody come in, they're cleaning specific deep carpet or just your normal regular janitorial service, that's not considered a utility. Neither is pest control or grease trap removal, HOA fees or any kind of association fees. Those are not considered utilities, but look and see if they're included in your lease. Insurance costs are not considered a utility, and then any kind of IT services that you have are also not considered a utility. One neat thing is that an office can actually be considered in the loan forgiveness. So this is really helpful for small businesses that are solopreneurs or self-employed. Maybe you don't have an office space, you work from home. As long as you have a dedicated area of your home that's used exclusively for business, so for me, my office here, you can use your mortgage interest or your rent and utilities for your home, a portion of those. So you would take your space that you use for your dedicated office, say it's 100 square feet, and you would take the total size of your home, which for this example, we'll use 1,000 square feet because that's easy math. So we know that 10% of our home is our office. That means that we can use 10% of our monthly expenses for rent, mortgage interest, and utilities for the actual home as part of qualified expenses. You do not have to claim these expenses on your 2019 tax return in order to be eligible to use home office as part of your loan forgiveness. But remember that anything that you use for your PPP loan forgiveness cannot be claimed on your 2020 taxes. So any of the payroll that you're going to use, any of your rent payments, any of your utilities, any of these expenses won't be able to be claimed as an expense on your 2020 tax returns. But you also don't have to claim this as any kind of income on your taxes as well. So it's kind of a wash there. And then finally, a question we get a lot is, can I pay my employees a bonus or hazard pay? And the answer to that is yes. So as long as the amount doesn't exceed the equivalent of $100,000 per year. So if you have an 8-week term, the maximum amount you can pay any employee would be $15,385. And if you have a 24-week loan term, the maximum amount you could pay any employee would be $46,154. So now we can move into the Q&A if anybody has any questions. If there's something that you want to ask specifically about your situation and you don't want to ask in the chat, you can feel free to email me. I'm happy to take questions. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you have yet to apply for a PPP and you would like to, we are still accepting PPP applications through the deadline or if until funds run out. You could just go to our website at www.prestamosloans.org/PPP. So it looks like there's a question here. Does the Flexibility Act that makes payroll requirements 60% still count towards those that received funds early and are choosing to stay within the 8-week time period? So the answer to that question is yes. Anybody that has a PPP loan, as long as you're using 60% for PPP, no matter whether you were funded prior to June 5th or after June 5th, you're eligible for forgiveness as long as you're using 60%. Great question.
Thanks so much, Amber, for this great session. Again, we've got plenty of time for Q&A. If you do have questions, you can go ahead and throw them in the chat window or in the Q&A box. And again, this session is being recorded, will be posted on our website later this afternoon. The link for that is also in the chat box. Here's a question. You mentioned there was an owner recovery rate for the percentage of loan proceeds. Can you talk a little bit more about the allocation requirements?
David, so I think you're referring to the owner compensation replacement. So if you are a self-employed individual and you used your 2019 Schedule C as documentation to get your PPP loan. If you were funded prior to June 5th, you have the option to use either the 8-week or the 24-week period. If your loan was funded after June 5th, then you have to use the 24-week. So in terms of the 8-week period, if you opt to keep with your 8-week period, you would be able to use 8/52 of your 2019 net income. So what you would do is you would take line 31 of your Schedule C, you would multiply that by 8 and then divide it by 52. That's the maximum amount of your PPP loan that you're eligible to use for forgiveness purposes. You would have to use the remainder of your loan for another eligible expense such as home office or mortgage interest or utilities. Now, if you are a small business that used your Schedule C, line 31, and you're in the 24-week period, you are automatically covered for 2.5 months times your average monthly net profit. So what you would do then is you would take your net profit from line 31, divide that by 12. That's going to give you your average monthly net profit. And then you multiply that by 2.5, and that's probably what your PPP loan amount is, because that's how you would have figured it out. So you are able to use that full portion, the full 2.5 months of your net profit, as your owner compensation replacement. I hope that answers your question. If not, you can chat and I'll try to expand on that. They made things a lot easier with this Flexibility Act. They tried to really remove a lot of the barriers and really maximize the amount that businesses can use for payroll purposes and for the owner compensation purposes. So I think they did a really good job this time around. I just wish they would have made the extension during the last time as well, so that we didn't have to think we were coming up to an end of the program.
Oh, 2 more questions just came in. One from Rebecca: if we choose to have the time period extend past 8 weeks, but don't want to wait the full 24 weeks, can we apply for forgiveness before the 24 weeks is over?
Yes, Rebecca. Once you use all of your funds for the PPP, you can apply for forgiveness through your lender. So I would just find out from your lender exactly what the forgiveness process looks like. They may have a particular requirement. I know that we require the full 8 weeks to pass before we're allowing anybody to apply for forgiveness, but once 8 weeks have passed, then any of our small businesses are eligible to apply. But once the funds have been expended, you are eligible to apply for forgiveness with your lender.
Thanks. And another from David: are fundraising activities that relate to raising a structured finance product eligible as a covered expense?
If the fundraising activities are as a result of W-2, if you're paying payroll to your employees for fundraising, then what you pay your employees for, as long as you're giving them the same amount of hours and you haven't reduced your pay, whatever they spend their time doing would be an eligible PPP expense. If you're talking about other types of activities, maybe like advertising or putting on events or softwares, those types of things are not considered eligible expenses. That is one question I haven't gotten before.
Another question: I received my loan before June 5th. I can choose to do the 24 weeks instead of 8 weeks, correct? Which means if I'm the only W-2 employee, I can also pay myself bonus pay for that time to max out the $46,000. Is that correct?
So Alyssa, yes. If you received your loan prior to June 5th, you can choose to do 8 weeks or 24 weeks. You have that option. Now remember, anybody that's funded after June 5th, you only have the option for 24 weeks. In terms of what you're paying yourself, if you're the only W-2 employee over that 24 weeks, you're eligible to use up to your full PPP amount. So if your PPP was 46,154, whatever your PPP amount was, you can go ahead and pay yourself a hazard pay or a bonus up to that amount. You just can't exceed 46,154. And again, if your PPP loan was less than that, then you wouldn't be able to use up to that full amount. You could only use up to the full amount of your PPP loan.
And Alyssa, and for whoever else may have joined a little bit late, we do record these sessions. They'll be posted on our website later this afternoon if you'd like to go back and watch the whole thing. I've posted the link to our bootcamp website in the chat box. So this recording will be posted up probably in the next couple hours if you want to go back and watch it. Any other questions for Amber? Amber, thank you so much for these great responses. I know it's a lot of good information, and it's funny to see how things have become a little bit more streamlined since the initial PPP several months ago.
Yeah, it really has. When I was doing these sessions in the beginning, it was my presentation and about 2 hours of Q&A, and then still at some point having to cut it off and then come back to answer those questions. So really, they did a lot to fix a lot of those issues, especially with the safe harbors. There was a lot of confusion around when do I have to bring my employees back and how do I have to bring them back and what if I can't bring them back? So those safe harbor exemptions that allow businesses to say, I was impacted by COVID-19, I can't bring my employees back because of health requirements, and making them exempt from having to bring those FTEs back has been really helpful. And for individuals that when you go to apply for forgiveness, there's a new easy application, and in the application you'll be able to select if those safe harbors apply to you, and then you'll be eligible to use that expedited application, which is a lot easier than the original forgiveness application. So I think that most everybody should be eligible. Obviously there's going to be some circumstances where it's not. There are some businesses that are thriving and that are exceeding what they were prior to February 15th, but most businesses are impacted, are not able to bring their workload back to full capacity. A lot of people are not able to bring employees back. So those safe harbors and the easy application will make it a lot easier for them to apply and maximize their forgiveness.
Well, Amber, I don't see any other questions, but if you have any kind of final thoughts or general statements that you think would be helpful for people on the line, would welcome your opinions.
Sure. Yeah, I would say just, keep abreast of any changes that are going on. One thing that we've learned about this program is that it's constantly changing and evolving. Right now, there's not the ability to get a second PPP loan, but I know that there's talks about it. I don't know what that would look like. I don't know if that will pass legislation, but it is something to kind of keep your eyes open, maybe check back in with your lender or Commerce Authority, check back on our website, or even just a general Google search about updates to the PPP program, especially as it gets closer and closer to August 8th when the program is going to be shut down, just to see if there's been any changes. At this point, I don't think, aside from another extension or changing so the businesses could get a second PPP under certain circumstances, I don't think anything else is going to change. They did a really good job with this Flexibility Act, so I think that we should be good there. But continue to keep notice of what's going on with this program, and just make sure that you're keeping your documentation so that you have all your ducks in a row, and it makes your application for forgiveness really easy at the end. I know a lot of people tend to procrastinate when it has to do with bookkeeping, so just start keeping track from the beginning to make things easier on yourself in the end. Sometimes I don't remember a check that I wrote 2 weeks ago if I haven't kept track of it. So waiting 24 weeks and then applying for forgiveness if you haven't kept good track could make it a little difficult.
Great. Thank you so much, Amber. Again, if there's not any more questions, I don't want to keep people on longer than we need to. So Amber, thank you so much again for today's session, and also for being such an fantastic long-term partner for this boot camp and the ACA. Always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Well, I hope everyone enjoys their week, and you should all go on to that website, the AZ Bootcamp website, and register for future sessions this week. We've got a great lineup, and we look forward to seeing you in a future session. Thanks, everyone.